Hi, thanks for having me. The Sky This Month presentation for this period, it doesn't fit perfectly within the month. You can see the dates on my initial slide here. We're going from today and we're going to the next Recreational Astronomy Night Meeting, and that's in the middle of September. So I'm talking a little bit about what's going on in August and then a little bit at the beginning of September. As usual, I've made an article. It's on our website now. It's live. You can see the web address is noted on my slide there, and we're going to share that in the YouTube chat. If you look up that web article now, you'll find that there's a downloadable calendar, a PDF file. As usual, I've got various things noted on a day-by-day basis. And I use my little icons like an eyeball or binoculars to inform you as to the equipment that you might haul outside to do that observing. I've made observing lists for some of the popular software applications with planning capabilities, and I've got all the links that I'm talking about, plus a few others there. If you have a QR code reader on your phone, you could take an image of that or capture that QR code, and that'll take you directly to that web article. If you're typing in that web address, watch out that it's case sensitive. You need the uppercase letters for the Sky This Month. And as Paul mentioned, I remind you to type in any questions into the YouTube chat, and do that at any point. Don't leave your questions to the end. As soon as things pop into your head, type them in. And I'll try to answer those questions for you. So let's go. Here's the particulars about the sun right now. You can see that it rose today for the Toronto area or points nearby at around 6:30. It's setting in about 45 minutes from now, so 8:15. But of course, it doesn't get really dark until sometime later when the sun is well below the horizon. We refer to that as astronomical twilight. So that starts at 10 p.m. and it concludes at 4:40. That's today. So when you crunch those numbers, that's giving you about 6.5 hours of darkness. But by the end of that time period that I'm reporting on, you can see all these times have shifted a little bit. We're in the steep part of the hourglass. Note those hourglass shapes on the right. Those are from the Sky and Telescope website. The time that the sunrise is changing, the time that the sunset is changing is very rapid at this time of year. So by the end of this period, about 4 or 5 weeks from now, we're up to 8 hours of darkness. I suppose that people like their hot summer days at the cottage. This is maybe not good news, but I always like these longer nights. There's lots of stuff going on with the moon. There are all the phases that I've noted in that table on the left side. I got gypped, actually. It's not fair. The new moon happened yesterday, and the next new moon phase is on September 17th, so I don't get a new moon in my time period. Boo! But that means if you want to do deep sky object observing right now, you got to do it now over the next week or so, while the sky is quite dark, and then early September to the middle of September, that's your next dark sky period. I've also noted some particulars about when there's something interesting going on the moon, or it's near a planet or a deep sky object. That graphic, by the way, is from the European Space Agency, and I'd like you to look at it closely there. What's wrong with it? There's one thing that I think is technically wrong, and that's surprising because this came from a space agency, but there's another thing that I don't think is sort of appropriate or well done. So I have a couple of issues with that diagram, and I after a while I thought, oh, I'll make my own, but it was taking too long. So it's pretty good. One of the things that's going on with the moon next week is the appearance of the Lunar X. This is quite a stark feature on the moon. Let's zoom in here. Tanya got a really nice photo of it. Near the center of the inset photo, at about a little bit down from center, you can see an X pattern. That's just due to the glare obscura effect, the lighting angle of the sunlight hitting the top edges of some craters. Head towards the Purback crater or one of those other craters. Now this effect starts at 6:10, so obviously the sky is still bright from my previous solar table. But the peak event, I predict that it will occur just after sunset, and it will carry on. The whole thing lasts for about 4 hours. So check that out. You do need a medium to a large telescope to see this feature because it's pretty small, or a long camera lens, ideally tracking. You should be able to do that. Tanya shot that afocal just holding up her phone to a telescope, so that's cool. Here's another feature. I've looked at this a couple of times, but I've never had a really good look, and I forgot back in June when the phase was optimal for this. But on the 26th, you can see the railroad or the straight wall. Technically, this is a Rupus Rectus feature where there's an elevation change in a crater or a maria, where it's a little bit like the Niagara Escarpment. You have a high elevation, there's a big drop. The elevation changes about 250 meters, 300 meters. So again, we'll zoom in here. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter got a nice photo of that. So you can see this nearly perfectly straight black line in the middle of Mare Nubium. So that's just due to the wall, the lower level, not being in the sunlight. So that's a neat sort of feature to look for. So a couple of interesting things going on with the moon. Now, this is not optimal time or the main event for Mars yet. That's happening later this year in October, but Mars is getting closer to us, or rather we're getting closer to it. And there is a notable event that happens within this time period, that on September 9th, the fourth planet will appear to stop moving against the background stars. So it's moving in a normal motion from west to east for the next little while. And you can see I've put the little UR here, where the moon's pretty close to New Pisceum right now, but then it will slow down, stop in reverse direction. That's retrograde motion, and that's just the effect of us being on the faster track, closer to the sun. And then it's October 13th. That's sort of the big date when we're at opposition. The point is that Mars is getting bigger, it's getting brighter, and features will become easier to see over the next little while, including the southern polar cap. So that's something to look for. There's a very nice photo by Elaine and Tony, and that was just a couple of days ago, with a 150 millimeter instrument. So keep an eye on Mars, look whenever you can. It's just going to get better and better over the next little while. And it's also interesting to note that there are 3 spacecraft on their way to the fourth planet right now, all due to arrive in February. Jupiter, even though it's past its opposition, I think we missed the oppositions of Jupiter and Saturn because of that crazy comet. 2020 F3 Neowise was distracting us, but Jupiter is still quite good right now, and it's still pretty big in the sky. And I started to look into it, and I was starting to put in my little calendar sort of when interesting events were happening. But I found in short order that there were so many things going on at Jupiter that I couldn't fit them. It would have overwhelmed my calendar, so I stopped. The bottom line is, just about any evening that you look at Jupiter over the next 4 weeks, you're going to see something interesting. And that includes the Great Red Spot going through the middle of the planet. Imagine a line going straight down through the middle of the planet from the north to south pole. That's the meridian. So we have GRS crossings when it crosses the meridian. We have the moons going in front of the planet. This photo by Claudio does not show any moons in front of it. You can see that two of them are off to the side. One's out of frame, and I believe one's behind at this time. But you can also, if you look closely at that photo, you can see there's a little black, inky black dot there, and that's a shadow caused by that nearby moon. So shadow transits are happening. There's a lot of those occurring. We also get occultations where a moon simply goes behind Jupiter, and Jupiter just blocks it from our view. And we can also get eclipses, if you can sort of figure out the math of this in your head. You know, the sun's at a different angle from the Earth, so there's a large shadow or shadow cone behind Jupiter, and when a moon goes into that, it will suddenly disappear. Or it may emerge from the eclipse and the moon will pop. It'll suddenly appear. And I'm not talking about behind the planet. It's just out in space, and it will go into the shadow or come out of the shadow. And it's pretty neat when you see those. A little heads up, if you use Stellarium, the free software for the PC, the Mac, or the Linux platform, Chris Vaughn and I were corroborating our notes, and we found that the positioning of the Great Red Spot is not correct. If we put in the proper Great Red Spot longitude, Stellarium wasn't showing that. Stellarium had that problem a number of years ago, but it looks like it's re-emerged. So you're going to have to double check that with some other software, or use the Sky and Telescope tool. You can see I've got those web addresses noted there. So the JUPOS will tell you the true location, and then you could use the Sky and Telescope software, the JavaScript tools, or some other software that you may have to double check the location. And we had to doctor or fine tune the number in Stellarium to get it to work. Here are events going on in August. That's just August. And what I'm doing here is listing when there's more than one thing happening at the same time, like a moon transit and a shadow transit, or the Great Red Spot at meridian and a moon transiting, or some other combination of that. So there's tons and tons of things going on here. And there's September. So again, almost every single night there's something interesting going on. All this is on my web article if you want to sort of dive deep into that and circle a few particular dates. I've noted a few with asterisks here that are like really outstanding. So those are really good nights to go look at Jupiter. Saturn is still great, even though it went through opposition back in late July. And while it's below the ecliptic, so not as good a view as we might get, it's still fantastic. It's always so great looking at that planet and seeing the rings. Some of your challenge sort of targets, if you're new to planet observing, is see if you can get that black line between the A ring and the B ring. You can see it quite clearly in that photo by Rick Foster. See if you can see the shadow of the planet on the rings. Obviously, there's many moons around Saturn. They're a little bit more challenging to exactly identify because they're not all lined up in a nice straight line or nearly straight line like they are at Jupiter. So I usually get out some software that accurately renders the positions of the moons to identify them. And I'm also trying for one of the challenge moons, Mimas. Mimas is tricky because it's a small moon. It's only 400 kilometers in diameter. It's very close to the planet. It only goes a little bit beyond the dimensions of the rings, 17 arc seconds from the planet. The chart that I'm showing there with the wavy lines, that's showing you how the moon is orbiting around the planet. The wide sweeping long wave, that's Titan. That moon's easy to see. But you can see Mimas is moving very quickly. It has just under a 1-day frequency. And again, if you can make it out, the light gray line, that vertical line, is the planet dimension. The dark gray lines bordering the planet, those are the rings, and you can see Mimas is just a bit beyond that. So I have not seen that faint moon to date, but I keep trying, and the best time to do that is when it's at elongations. Neptune is coming into view. In fact, it, within this next time period, reaches opposition. So that means the Earth is as close to a planet as it can be. If you drew a line from the sun through the Earth and extended it out into space, it would go through that other planet. So that's the best time to look at planets, to try and see some features or some of the moons. So Neptune is great. It's really colorful. It's below the limit of naked eye visibility, but you should be able to see it binoculars. And if you put a telescope on it, even though it's very small, it's 2.3 arc seconds in size, it still should be quite colorful, a nice deep sort of blue color. And amazingly, even though it's really far away, it's 29 astronomical units. Astronomical unit is the Earth-Sun distance. It's 29 times that distance. Actually, maybe a different way to think about it is that the light travel time to Neptune is over 4 hours. So even though it's really far away, you can see a moon around that planet. Triton is pretty easy to see. I've seen it many times in an 8-inch telescope. So that's something to try for. Again, these moons are a little challenging to see. So try to time it during elongations when the moon swings out quite far away from the planet. Now, I've noted the elongations here for Triton, and in early September, there may be not great times. That's pretty late, but it gets better and better, or easier, more convenient later in September. On the 10th and the 13th, for example, those are happening before midnight. So some cool things to try for there. There's an occultation coming up this month, and it's sort of perfectly placed. You don't have to travel for this. You might be able to do this in your backyard. It has a very high rank, so there's a good likelihood that you'd see it. The magnitude drop, it's not huge. It's just over a magnitude, and it's fairly quick at just over 2 seconds. But the star is relatively bright. It's has a V filter magnitude of 12.5. But the path is neat. Sort of everybody from Prince Edward County through the Golden Horseshoe out to Tillsonburg and St. Thomas, everybody gets to see that. I'm just near the Georgina point on that map, near the G, so I'm beyond the Sigma line. No opportunity for me there. I'm willing to try an occultation again, but it's got to be super easy for me. Anyway, give that a shot. And the Asteroid Occultation website that's noted there, you can get lots more information and maps and charts to learn more about that. So let's talk about some deep sky objects. Actually, the deep sky objects that are in Scorpius, Scutum, Ophiuchus, parts of Sagittarius, these are all fading away or setting. Scorpius at around midnight is starting to go below the horizon. So this is really kind of the last opportunities that we're getting to look at a bunch of those famous Messier objects and some of the really bright objects near the center of the galaxy. I quite like this image by Jeff Dutton of the Eagle Nebula. So look while you can for those. But what I'm going to propose here is we take an interesting trip, bit of a departure, what I normally do here. Why don't we follow the meridian? Meridian is an imaginary line that runs from the south direction, goes overhead through the zenith, and then off to the north. And of course, it'll go right near the North Celestial Pole, right beside Polaris, continuing on to the north. I mentioned the meridian because that's sort of a rule of thumb. Best time to look at objects is when they're on or near the meridian, because that means they're as high as they can be in the sky. The exception to that is objects that are between the North Celestial Pole and then down to the northern horizon. Ideally, you shouldn't look at objects in that zone because those objects are circumpolar, and 6 months later, they'll be in the opposite side. They'll be in the high part of the meridian. So don't kind of look in this area here if you can avoid it. Wait, be patient, and those objects will climb higher later in the year or in the opposite sort of season. anyway, let's follow along the meridian and see what we can see. There's lots of neat sort of stuff here. And what I'm going to do is use stellarium here for kind of our tour of things that we can look at. So let me just do a little switcheroo here. So I'm using the Stellarium desktop software, which is free. The Sky Safari software is another good tool to help you find all these objects that I'm talking about. A lot of these objects are on the observing programs that RASC offers, and if you're going for your certificates, the Messier certificate or the finest NGC, I've got a few sort of subjects for you. Actually, for fun, this is maybe right away starting with a challenge object, but something maybe for fun to try and do is look at Microscopium. Did you know that you can see the Microscopium constellation from Ontario, and you can see all the main stars of the microscope constellation? So that's kind of cool. I've never looked at these objects, but while there aren't any sort of notable deep sky objects or nebula in this area, there's some cool double stars. So there's some fairly bright stars that you can see, like the Gamma star and the Epsilon star, and there's the Alpha, which is actually not the brightest star in that constellation. That's a bit unusual, but that's a good sort of double star to try and see. Moving back sort of towards the meridian, which is this green line that's plotted by the software. It's described as the spectra. I've never heard that name, but that's our globular cluster, Messier 55, cataloged by Charles Messier. And if we zoom into that, we see that kind of the classic globular structure kind of shape, a tightly compact ball of stars visible in the sky. So that's a Messier object to check out. You can see that's just below the planets Saturn and Jupiter that we talked about before. There's another globular that's sort of positioned a bit left of Saturn. So a couple of globular clusters surround our galaxy. They're above and below the disk of our galaxy. There might be hundreds of these. We can't see all of them. The ones that are on the far side of the galaxy are essentially hidden from us, but you could try for those. And again, they're on that certificate program. Another deep sky object to check out. The green sort of circle with the lines here. That's a planetary nebula. Planetary nebulas aren't planets, but they're mostly spherical. They look like a ball. Under high magnification. They're often colored blue or greenish. So check out the Little Gem Nebula, also known as NGC 6818 from the new general catalog. And that's on the finest list. So if you're working on your finest NGCs with RASC, that's pretty good. If you're looking at the whole sky just with your eyes, you'll be able to easily see a very wide pairing of stars that are up at the top right-hand corner of Capricornus. The stellarium doesn't show it the way I often sort of imagine it, and that's a shape of a bat with outspread wings, and its right wing at the top, where its claw would be. There's a couple of widely spaced stars there. So this is a neat object to look at with every magnification that you have at your disposal. Start naked eye, then put binoculars on it, and you can see some fairly wide stars again. Both the upper one here, that's Alpha or Algeti, and then not quite sure how to pronounce this, Dabi. That star is also a fairly wide double. If I zoom in here in stellarium, you can see a wide pair there and a wide pair there. But then look at these stars telescopically, each of these groups, and you'll split those into more double stars. So there's quite a few double stars just in that sort of area alone up at the top right of Capricornus. A challenge object here, it's way up near the top. It doesn't show in this software. These are star-like objects, but a challenge object is over near the left wing of the bat, if you will, and that's a quasar. A quasar PHL 1811. That's not terribly far away, but it's one of the fairly easy quasars to see. It's around a magnitude 13 or 14 object, so you're going to need an 8-inch or a 10-inch telescope to see that. And you're going to have to star hop into that region. So that's a bit of a challenge object there. Another planetary nebula along the way is the Saturn Nebula, which, if you get a good view of it, does have these little sort of wings sticking out on the sides that give the appearance of a ringed planet. So that's cool. If we continue moving up here, the meridian is going through Aquila. There's lots of stuff in there. We could spend an hour in there. Hercules has lots of double stars in it, so you can check that out. There's Delphinus, and I like looking at some of the stars that are in the head of the dolphin, the Alpha star, the Gamma star at the nose, the Delta star, and just around that area, tons of double stars in that area. And some of those are really, really colorful. Scooting over to Sagitta or Sagitta, a little arrow shape there, right kind of in the middle of that constellation, is another globular. That's Messier 71. And then just above it, not far away, is the Dumbbell Nebula. That's a really big but a bit faint planetary nebula, again, also known as Messier 27. This is in Vulpecula. You see it over here? Usually in dark skies with very low power with binoculars, you can see that neat sort of pattern of stars. If I zoom in too much, you don't sort of see it. If I stay zoomed out a bit, you can see that very unmistakable upside down question mark or upside down coat hanger of stars. That's not an official cluster, but or open cluster, but that's a neat target to look at. And if you're in really dark skies and you have really good vision or a good prescription, you might be able to see that naked eye. It's quite small. But that's a neat thing to look at. Back in the middle of June, I was looking just in that area, watching the asteroid Pallas pass through here, and I noticed all kinds of double stars that were not cataloged. So I've photographed them, and I'm trying to sort of reduce that data and submit information about that data, doing a bit of citizen science on objects found in Vulpecula. There's lots of doubles in this area that are known, and a few deep sky objects that are interesting too. In the background, of course, is the Milky Way, so there's lots going on there. And in fact, we're right near Cygnus, so lots to look at there. I've also been trying to photograph the Veil Nebula, and it's huge. It's this massive object that's a supernova remnant, and just to get the western veil, or is it the eastern? The eastern one, excuse me, the one that's on the left here, that is taking me 12 frames that I'll have to put together in a mosaic. But I've been using H-alpha filters, and it's just a fantastic sort of object there. The west veil, the one that's on the right with the bright star in the middle, that one's taking me 9 frames or 8 frames to capture all that. And you can see by the background image here in the software, it is still even larger than that with faint elements. Again, we could spend an hour talking about deep sky objects that are in Swan and some of the famous double stars that are in here, and the big North American Nebula, which I think I've seen naked eye in a dark sky location. So again, lots of things there, but let's just scoot along. The software is sort of flipping me around because I've just gone through Zenith. That's sort of what's straight overhead. And now we're following along kind of the border between Cepheus and Draco. So lots of good stuff here. Cat-Eye Nebula, and so on. The Iris Nebula, very faint object there. You need dark skies, or that's a challenging object to image because it's got a really bright core like the trapezium in the middle of Messier 42. While we're here looking at Cepheus, if you see the house shape and you look at the one corner of it, that's the Zeta star. And then a bit beyond that, moving outwards from the house, sort of kitty corner from the other corner, there's another star, Epsilon, Cepheid. And then you can see a bit to the north here is Delta. And Delta is a naked eye variable star that you can check out. You can easily gauge this just with your eye. Is it as bright as Zeta? Is it as bright as Epsilon? And that's a really quick way that you can gauge the brightness of that. If you're looking for interesting colored stars, there's the Garnet star, or Mu Cepheid. I had heard a lot about that. The first time I looked at it, I thought, oh, it's good, but it's not red. I was expecting a really sort of intense red color, but it's pretty good. There's another better star, I think, in this area. Check out that the S Cepheid star. It's much dimmer, much fainter, but I think it's a more intense sort of red color, like an ember in a fire. You can see we're pretty close to Polaris here. Did you know Polaris is a double star? So check that out. It's pretty easy to split those. And maybe we're at the end of the journey here, because I said don't look at stuff now from the North Celestial Pole to the northern horizon. But you know what? We haven't looked at any galaxies on this trip. So if you do want to finish off with some galaxies, there's Bode's galaxy, there's the Cigar galaxy. Let's zoom into those. Those are lovely. And so technically, this is not the best time of year to look at these because they're below the North Celestial Pole, but it's pretty compelling. They're sort of close here. And then finally, we're down at our northern horizon. So that was a quick sort of trip through the whole sky, going from the south overhead through the zenith, and we saw lots of different objects along the way. And again, that a bunch of those are on our certificate programs if you're pursuing those. There's a quick note about the programs. I've mentioned objects that are on the Explore the Moon, on the Explore the Universe, the Messier, the Finest NGC, some of the more advanced programs I've noted here. Stay tuned. Our double star observing program should be launched pretty soon this year. And tonight, actually, it's on the docket, it's on the outline for topics with the National Board meeting to talk about the development of a working group or a committee to build an electronically assisted astronomy observing program with an appropriate certificate. So that's in the very early stages there, but that's good news. So I have no idea what my time is, how long I've run here, but if there's any time, I'll take any questions. If you and a question occurs to you later, or we don't have time, you can send a question to that email address, and I'm happy to help you with that. So, Paul, should we?
Yes, let's go ahead with Q&A.
Okay. If there's any.
Anyway, what do you think? Any questions?
Just put out the call for any questions.
Paul, do you have any?
No, I don't think we have any questions.
Okay.
Probably because you did such a great job. Right? Very, very thorough.
Thanks. You can see my credit note there. I use lots of tools, lots of software, lots of paper resources. I thank my photographers for their contributions. So, yeah. There is a question.
That come up?
Yeah.
They just came up. The first one is Magnolia. I'm currently working on my Explore the Universe certificate. Where can I get feedback on my initial log pages?
Magnolia, if you're with a RASC center, there should be a couple of members that could help you with that. And if not, if you're not with RASC, which is fine, you don't have to be a RASC member to complete the Explore the Universe certificate. You could email me maybe one of your log pages, and I can have a look and give you any comments or suggestions if you'd like. And when you have completed the whole program, you can send that in to any representative on the national observing committee. But if you're with a RAS chapter, there should be a couple of people locally that could help you with that.
We have a question from Chris Vaughn. When does the ISS return?
I did not look up the ISS intervals or have a slide for it, but it is in my, it's on my calendar when the passes resume. So I don't have that in front of me, but it is on my PDF calendar. I did note it there. It would take me a couple of minutes to look it up, but of course, a great website that you might use, which I'll just load up here quickly, is the Heavens Above tool. So if you go to heavens-above.com, so here's that website, and there's the address. Notice it's got the hyphen in it. Then you can look up the ISS information. It knows my location, so that's a little bit sort of shifted here. If I look at the ISS passes right now over the next couple of weeks, you can see that they're in the early morning, and then they stop. So that's just the phasing of it, that they're in the morning. Now, if I go forward a bit, we'll see that they start back up. They continue. Excuse me. They do continue into the morning, into early September, and then there's a shift. You can see on the 14th, they shift to the evening. So if you're an early bird, for the next couple of weeks, you've got lots of opportunities to see the ISS. And if you're looking at this table and you're trying to figure out, what are the sort of really good ones or the best ones, look for the largest negative number. So there's a 3.8, for example, on the 12th of September. That's an early morning one. And you can see now, clicking on the time, the path is showing. So that's a great website. I also have an app on my Android phone which calculates the ISS passes, and it can issue alerts or notifications. There's lots of good tools like that, good apps that are available. But this is one of our favorite websites that we regularly use. Okay.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Blake. Great presentation. As always, good to have you.